Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. Check that out for all the content getting you ready for the NFL draft. Adam Caplan is at the draft in Vegas, baby. We got plenty to dive into as the Eagles are getting ready to pick. Where will they pick? Will they make the pick at number 15? Some interesting stuff coming out today. Apparently, Jameson Williams was asked about playing with Devontae Smith, and he had some interesting things to say about pairing up. He said the Eagles want to draft him and pair him with Smith. So is that the target? We've heard his name a lot. Let's dive into what we know right now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. As Adam Caplan from Inside the Birds podcast and InsideTheBirds.com joins me here on the Sports Bash. Welcome back, Adam.
Mike, good to be with you from Las Vegas. Yeah, I got here about an hour ago, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a very unpredictable draft because this is, and we're definitely going to get into this because this is going to be a big issue for the draft. This is one of the weakest first rounds we've probably seen in 2 decades. It's not a great draft. It's deep, but there are just not a lot of high-end players, which is kind of the word that I've gotten over the last week or so. Not as strong as I quite thought in the beginning. However, it's stronger for certain positions, and that's the way the league sees it.
All right, well, let's dive into some of the things that we're hearing or you're hearing out there, in terms of first-round talent. We hear all the time. How many guys, most teams have turned their boards in right now. They got to get ownership's approval and sign-offs on this. So how many teams, how do teams see the first round? How many first-round players are we looking at?
It's funny you say that about the ownership. They got to get ownership on board. Today is the day, usually late afternoon, early evening, where the general manager and the head coach meet with the owner, and they tell them where they're going to go with their first-round pick. They give them They just give them here are the guys we're looking at where we pick, like the order of here's how our board stacks up, and here's the guy we really want, and that's really the way it goes. In terms of first-round grades, it depends who you speak with. When I spoke to someone a month ago who was a decision maker, he said 12 to 15. In recent weeks, it's I would say anywhere from 15 to 20. So I would say where the Eagles are picking with their first rounder at 15, I think they're in good shape. It's at 18 where you start scratching your head a little bit, because I thought Harry Rosen made a great point last week. You can't. Everybody looks at the same tape, right? The coaching tape is the coaching tape. 20, 25 years ago, there were legitimate sleepers who, if you've got great scouts, like they'll uncover, or they'll be so high on them, they get the GM on board, where they wind up being right. And it's just by the way, Brent Selleck was a guy the Eagles were super high on many, many years ago. He didn't run well before the draft, but they stuck to the process on their tape. They tried. So in this draft here, in terms of, I would say minimum of 15 legit first-round grades, but let me just explain that. There's a difference between good, very good, and elite. That there are not a lot of elite players in this draft. There are a lot of very good to good. There are maybe 4 to 6 great players and only a couple elite players. That's why this draft is not looked upon as being a great draft.
All right. Well, you talked about the amount of first-round guys. Who are these elite players? Who are guys to keep an eye on? Because I'm imagining, Adam, when we talk about elite players, they're the players that teams are going to have their eyes on, and if they start to fall, they're the trade-up type of guys. So these guys are pretty important when you're sitting at 15 and 1 or 2 of them start to fall. Who are these elite guys that teams in the 15, 16, 17 range might have their eyes on?
Well, there's zero chance the Eagles could get Ahmad Gardner anywhere close to 15. We'll start with him. He's the best player for this draft.
Right, not picking at 15. I'm talking about trading up to what, 6, 7, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, all right, we'll get to that. So that's a good way to set it up. So Ahmad Gardner is the best player for this draft. I'm pretty convinced. He's one of only a few elite players. Aiden Hutchinson is, I think he's elite based on people I've spoken with. Some people think he's just good. He very well could be the first player taken overall tomorrow, and the reason is very simple. He is like Ahmad Gardner. If you go with the term cleanest prospect for the draft, no injury history, no off-the-field issues, production, talented, tape's very good, but he doesn't have the upside of maybe Ahmad Gardner. who I believe, talking to people I trust, is the best player for this draft. Jeff and I have been Moshe and I have been talking about him on Inside the Birds since Thanksgiving, and he's probably a little better than I anticipated. It's just what happens is, Mike, I'm big on talking to position coaches because they grade differently than scouts do. Scouts, they know that they're off the field, medical. They're a little bit harder on players than coaches are. They'll be hard on them, but they look at it a little different than scouts do. So the position coaches I spoke with, they all agree Ahmad Gardner is not only the best defensive back, safety, or corner, he's the best player for this draft. Then Aiden Hutchinson, by the way, his dad, I think it was Greg Hutchinson. It's not Steve, the former guard there. His dad was also a defensive lineman. Both, by the way, wore number 97.
All right. Well, good little tidbit there by you, Adam Caplan. Let's take a look at so there's some of the elite players that we're looking at. And I mentioned that because, it was casually brought up on the NFL Network yesterday. Hey, the Eagles are one of the teams that seems to be making the most calls to move up, and they might be looking at, Kayvon Thibodeau, what if he falls? So if there's a guy, Gardner, Thibodeau, somebody, what's that number? Is it 6th, 7th, 8th? Where's that spot that you think, if there's a guy there, that Roseman picks up the phone and makes that call?
Mike, Thibodeau could go anywhere from 2 to 10. It's the issue with him is, and the reason why he's not the number 1 overall pick, barring a shock, is his tape shows some issues with stiffness. And some coaches I spoke with do not believe that could be coached. You're either born with the ultimate flexibility or you're not. Yes, he's productive. Yes, he's athletic. Yes, you could stand him up. He could play with his hand down. Super smart guy, competitive, high character guy. I don't buy this nonsense about him having off the field interest and how serious he is about football. I don't buy it. I know he's a podcaster and a chess player. Who cares? Yeah. Guy's a really good football player. But the legitimate stuff from the tape is really true. You can't deny it. It's on tape, and there's some stiffness. But he's going top 10. Now, if he does drop, I don't know how Jeff, Moshe and I are going to drop our show tomorrow. We've got some thoughts on this, but in terms of trade, how far they trade up, I just don't know how far Thibodeau will drop. Kyle Hamilton, here's another question. I don't buy the 40-time slip. The tape is the tape. The tape's really, really good. He's got versatility. He's got unique sizes, 6'4", 220+ for safety. The Eagles don't believe in drafting safeties early. They just don't. We know that. We've been through this, how many times of not doing it in the first round. It's like verboten for them. They're not trading up for an offensive lineman. I don't see anything like that. There's the kind of guys they would trade up for, to me, would be high upside guys who teams might probably think that maybe there's some questions about. Where last year the only question about Devontae Smith was his size at 170 pounds soaking wet. That was a problem for some teams. We haven't really talked about that before, Mike, but the Eagles thought he was explosive. He played a great program, and he's an alpha dog. He's a leader, so that worked out. So those are the kind of guys that would drop. Guys who teams have some questions about, some who might go from anywhere from 8 to 12, and then you're talking about moving up.
Yeah, and what we're this late in the process. A lot of these guys are doing interviews. They're talking. They're saying some interesting, like the day before the draft, they're finally saying some interesting things. But here's Jameson Williams saying the Eagles told him they would like to draft him and play him alongside Devonta Smith. Now, is that just what the team says? Hey, we want to, or we would like to? What are we supposed to make into something like that?
Nothing, absolutely nothing. Teams lie all the time. Okay. They'll tell 5 players who want to draft you, particularly a position coach. No, I'm not saying they didn't say it.
Yeah,
they might have said it to them. That doesn't mean they're not going to. That doesn't mean they're going to draft him. That's nothing to do with it.
Well, I don't know. Right? I don't know if that's them saying something to the kid, and then the kid saying something he's not really supposed to say.
Well, believe me, I've been through this with agents for years. They will swear to me the team said if their players there, they're drafting them, they don't want them drafting them. So I don't buy that stuff anymore. What I buy is where they have the player graded, and we've got some really interesting stuff on not only the Eagles with this player, but how coaches see him. And remember, Williams is coming off a significant injury. Though I'm told there are questions about when he'll be ready, but it was an isolated ACL, and he'll be okay. He'll be able to play this season. The question is when. But he is unbelievably explosive, but it's such a shame that he tore his ACL.
Yeah, a couple guys in this draft. Pickens, another one. Mechie's another one.
Yep.
Torn ACLs, a couple of them in the draft. Keep an eye on that on draft night. All right, Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds, InsideTheBirds.com, in Vegas for the draft. All right, quarterbacks. We heard it's a weak class. How does it all shake out? Do we get a guy taken at number 2? Does that mean if a guy goes at 2, another one goes at 6? What happens with the quarterback class?
I'd be shocked if any quarterback went at 2. Mike, I felt since January, it's Kenny Pickett, saw him at the Senior Bowl, did a good job in wet weather. I still think he'll be the first quarterback taken. I've got him slide to the Saints at 16. It doesn't mean that look, no one got it right last year with Trey Lance. No one knew that they were going to trade up like crazy. A lot of us thought Mac Jones, because I know for a fact some people in the personnel department for the Niners preferred Mac Jones, but the head coach, who has personnel control, defied that, and he wanted Trey Lance, who was clearly not ready last season. But I would say that with the quarterbacks, Mike, it's Pickett first. There's some questions about Corral. I think Albert Breer wrote about it, and I have similar information, which we're going to talk about tomorrow on Inside the Birds. Malik Willis is the wild card. He could go anywhere in the first round. I've got him slated to Detroit, not at 2, but at 32. For Sports Grid, I did my mock draft with them on the air with Scott Farrell the last couple of days. I know you saw Scott some weeks ago.
I did, yes.
But Desmond Ridder, a top 40 pick. I don't know that he or Sam Howell go in the first round. I think both go in the second round.
Yes, I did meet Scott. Very interesting cat. A lot of fun, by the way. He was at the MAC basketball
he's awesome.
Championship.
Yep.
All right, so Howie Roseman, the Eagles, what's their approach? What do they need to accomplish in this draft? They have 10 picks. They've restocked the coffers with draft picks. So what are they looking to accomplish? How are they approaching a 10-pick class?
That's a great question, and the way I would look at it is this, Mike. They need to come out with this draft with 2 guys who are going to play right away. What I mean, starters. At 15, they absolutely have to get a starter. I know from talking to a high-ranking team source, they're fine picking at 15 or 18. They have a general idea of, they have a grouping of players who might be there. But they need to come out with 2 starters here. Typically, general managers or personnel directors say every draft we want 2 starters. Doesn't mean immediate, but you'd like to get 2 starters out of this draft. Whether they go for receiver, lineman, whatever it may be. Now, if they go with Jordan Davis, he's not starting. This year, he's not. That would hasten, obviously with Fletcher Cox being on a 1-year deal here, we know Cox would obviously not be back next year. If they, and by the way, Javon Hargrave's on the final year of his deal, you can expect him to be back for long term because they love him. But if they took Jordan Davis, he doesn't start week 1. But he would be eventual starter. That would be obvious. At 18, if they took a corner, that guy could start week 1. The way they have to look at it is they must get 2 starters, but don't reach for it. It's okay if that guy doesn't start week 1 or week 5. Remember, the draft is about the future. It's not about this season. It's with an eye on this season, but it's 99% about the future, about what's your roster look like in the future. And you want to get starters. The way it was explained to me is, Mike, is you want to get guys in the first or second round as starters who you believe will be with your team for 2 contracts in at least 6 years. You want 6 years out of high draft picks. And that's why, by the way, running backs don't go in the first round because of the injury rate.
Well, we know that it's interesting, too, because, you mentioned what they want to try to accomplish, find 2 starters in this draft. They have 10 picks this year. I guess one question would be, do you anticipate them making 10 picks? Is that too many picks? Are they going to try to get rid of some of those picks?
It's funny, Mike. When we did our off-season team needs for the Eagles back in March after free agency, right before free agency started, I would argue the needs are exactly the same. We probably mentioned this 20 times on our shows since. They haven't really changed. If you look at it, the real needs, right? Wide receiver, they need 2. By training camp, one way or the other, and they need 2. For the future, they need 2. Rager is not a part of the rotation right now. If he's with the team, we'll see if he can earn a spot. I mean, they're not going to cut him, but in terms of a game day roster, a game day role, the only role that the 2 roles that are Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins. Quez Watkins has never shown to be dependable. He definitely started to emerge last season. He's explosive, but is he a full-time starter? That remains to be seen. They need a D end. They need a D tackle. Now they need two corners who could play on the outside. Right now they have one guy. That's it. They need a safety. We all know that for the future. I'm probably in the minority of this. I don't think they need a linebacker because they don't believe in they don't really believe in putting resources at linebacker, Mike. But as we go through this, I mean that's about 6 or 7 players right there. But to finish that off, your question, no, I don't believe they'll keep all 10 because they're big on trading for the future, packaging picks and getting picked for next year.
So, in your mind, what's a good draft look like? Like overall, at the end of the day, filling those needs, right? You mentioned safety, corner, not linebacker, but what is a good weekend for you?
One key receiver, definitely one big time receiver, right? One receiver. I think we all the people listening to on 97.3 and Inside the Birds know that's a stud receiver. A defensive end who will eventually take over for Brandon Graham. You got to get that guy, or Josh Sweat's a starter, but who's going to take over for Derek Barnett or push him and eventually be the guy. Got to get a start. They need a big time corner on the outside who could start, and then probably a D tackle of note. I will tell you that I really like Marlon Tuipulotu, who really didn't play last season due to a significant hamstring problem. But they need another D tackle. And if you look at it, those are the positions where they absolutely have to do it. Not only for this year, Mike. It's interesting. All the needs they have this year line up for future needs. It's not always like that, but for this year, it absolutely is for the future and for now.
Well, obviously, we'll see it all unfold Thursday night. One last thing. We know Howie Roseman. He likes to wheel and deal. He likes to do something. Could they deal any players on the current roster away during the draft this week? Do you see a current player that is moved?
Yeah, third day of the draft. I know from talking to other teams, I just find this hard to believe, but these are impeccable sources. They continue to tell me that the Eagles don't want to move Dillard. I mean, I don't understand that. I mean, what's the point? Fifth-year option coming up after the draft. Why? You're not going to pick it up. I mean, I know you could just let him play out this last year, and then let him get a compensatory pick. So it's interesting. We'll have to see. I think obviously Rager and Dillard are the two that keep an eye on the third day, which is rounds, by the way, 4 through 7. Just because remember we used to have 2 days for the draft, and now we only have 3. We have 3, and they break it up here, and it's the weather's great, and I hope everyone enjoys the draft. And make sure you listen to tomorrow morning's show, which we drop at 6 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, and we'll release our list of players we've heard the Eagles are on, and there's always one they sneak in. We both missed on Derek Barnett in 2017. Jeff and I did the draft for local radio. I had said they were going to go after McCaffrey, which turned out to be true. He got close enough, but he was to your question earlier, like Sauce Gardner, right? Sauce Gardner will never get close enough, I don't believe, and McCaffrey could not get them close enough to even think of trading now. So they went with Derek Barnett, it was a surprise. And when we were down there in Philly, Mike, that was not who they wanted. Remember who they wanted? The fans.
Who did the fans want that year?
And they were not happy.
No, I don't remember.
Reuben Foster.
Oh, okay.
Reuben Foster.
The linebacker.
It was crazy. Yep. Who was a complete bust for the Niners because of off-the-field issues. Yeah.
All right. Well, Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds. He'll be back on Friday to recap round number 1 and preview round 2, 3, and, of course, the weekend 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll get some sort of reaction from Thursday's first round and then thoughts on what could happen. That's on Friday's edition of Football at 4 with Adam Caplan. Tomorrow, Andrew DeCecco will tell us how it will all happen right here on Football at 4. Adam, appreciate it, man.
You got it. Thank you.
That's Adam Caplan, InsideTheBirds.com, and the Inside the Birds podcast here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.